Tony and Zach, thank you so much. Yes, our first live guest, we've got Grace Sharkey on the show. Grace and I haven't met in person yet, but I am an admirer of hers. I swear, she has been such a joy to work with already. Grace, how are you doing today?
I'm doing really good, and I'm really excited for you to be on the team and to see some of your content coming up. So I'm happy that you're part of the squad now.
Thank you so much. I'm excited for it. It's been a good time so far. Now, Grace, I know you're joining us with Prompt's Chief Operating Officer, Kai Zimmerman, and tell us what exactly we're getting into today.
Yeah, so I had a really interesting interview and just conversation overall with Kai a couple days ago about the overall global shipping market, right? Especially we're seeing issues right now with shutdowns in Shanghai and the Russia-Ukraine conflict as well. There's so many questions out there of what exactly people should be expecting. Now, to give people a little bit of background, what Prompt does is they work with a number of large global shippers, including DSV, Sea Logistics, more freight forwarders, Crowley Maritime as well. And they work to automate a lot of their processes so that they can clearly get visibility of shipments faster, do a lot of the paperwork faster for their customers. So they take care of a lot of that back office automation that helps keep these freight forwarders moving and keeping their freight moving as well. And it was really interesting conversation because a lot of what they do has to really deal with a lot of the problems that we see when it comes to standardizing a lot of the operations of global freight, especially earlier in this year. Well, a couple months ago, early this year, we're only a quarter in. We've seen standardization come out from the Biden administration through their Flow initiative. The FMC has also come out with their own ideas of how they want to standardize the ports as well. So this is something that's big for Prompt. This is a lot of the work that they're doing. And of course, if we could get standardized data within these terminals, then of course they're going to be able to automate for their customers even more so, right? And I think what's the most concerning to me, especially when you consider what Zach actually just showed on that map, what a new normal of our freight ebbs and flows could look like, is a lot of the larger enterprises, larger retailers out there have already started making these huge investments within the ports in order to hedge against those huge dips that we've seen now over the past couple of years. And what really concerns me now is there's a lot of people that are entering the market, whether it's starting their own businesses or becoming their own small retailers, that have been able to compete with large retailers because of a lot of the technology that's now available. If you think about it, if you get Stripe, a website creator, and a good marketing team, you could start any retail business within a couple of hours for under $1,000. But what's concerning is, how are you going to be able to sustain that business, and how are you going to maneuver in this global environment when you don't have the volume leverage that a lot of these retailers have, and the investment into their port and off-dock storage and warehousing like you've seen these companies have before. Now, there are companies, I think, like Walmart and Amazon who are going to be able to push a lot of those investments down to their individual retailers and companies they work with, vendors that clearly sell through those platforms. Same with Target and Home Depot as well. But it's interesting to see the last couple of years, so many smaller enterprises taking advantage of the e-commerce market, being able to ship and get supplies from all over the globe. What is their outlook going to look like a couple of years from now? And really the big point that Kai wanted to point out was, now is the time to make these investments. Now is the time for people to start automating their processes, because in 2 years or so, much like what Zach was just showing, it's going to be a different freight market, and only a few will be able to keep prices down to a fair level for the shippers that are out there today.
Yeah, I think you bring up great points. I mean, you talk about the buying power that some of these larger retailers have, right? That the smaller ones don't. They kind of miss out on. And like Zach said, that freight market is going to be different, and you don't want to wait until the next disruption, right? We saw COVID kind of this first disruption being that. I mean, is it just the sense of urgency now that after we've dealt with COVID, that these smaller retailers are facing?
I think it's a sense of urgency, but it's also almost just allowing those smaller retailers to notice the investments that these larger retailers are making. I mean, I think one of my favorite cases to watch, and I'm really excited to see their growth over the next couple of years, is the Port of Savannah. They've invested so much into their off-dock capabilities, being able to get unloaded faster, get those containers out of the ports and into various distribution centers around that they're investing in as well around their port. And I think that's why you see so much growth in their activity, because they're getting stuff in and out. But I think what's important is for people to realize that a part of these conversations and these investments are large retailers that are coming forward and saying, hey, ports, this needs to get done. So I think what's more important is just showcasing to people, like, these are the actions that your competitors are taking. Are you a part of those conversations as well? Are you thinking about who you're partnering with? Are you thinking about what services you're using to sell your goods on? Is it someone like Walmart? Is it someone, or is it someone like maybe Kroger, who hasn't had that deep investment? Or, I mean, I'm more north, right? So someone like Meijer, who hasn't had that deep investment. And so that's what I think is important, is for these retailers to start to realize, okay, who should I be watching? And even for the freight forwarders, right? What ports should I be investing in? Where should I be thinking about, routing for my customers in the future as well?
Personally, I think about the history and the loyalty that these bigger brands already have, that these smaller brands are going to be competing with and are just working to make, right? I guess, what might Kai have said on how these smaller brands can really kind of get themselves out there? I guess just take notes from the bigger guys and hope that it works for them?
A little bit. I think the biggest thing for him was finding any way that you can better operate now than you've had, right? So whether it's investing in a company like Prompt, who's going to help you automate your processes to compete with them, right? Because at the end of the day, they are going to find customers. This is such a fragmented industry. It's not like one day freight forwarders are just going to ignore small enterprises or small shippers. But it's important, I think, for them to realize the different technologies out there that's going to make them an attractive customer to those freight forwarders. It's going to allow them to gain more customers, right? Like if you're a freight forwarder, you're going to want to know that those small enterprises are scaling and growing. So for him, I think it's more of, if you see yourself around here in 2 years or so, how are you setting yourself up to make sure that your relationships are set so that when these rates do pop back up or return to normal, depending on what party you're in, will you be able to continue to make that profit, right? Especially freight forwarders, like, and global shippers. They're just like trucking companies. They don't historically make huge margins. So we need to prepare them to be back to their normal their normal margins in the next couple of years. In order to do so, let's make sure we're spending this time making those investments with that gain that we've made over the last year.
Awesome. I think you make some great points there, especially about the margin pressures, right? We talk about it all the time on the truckload side, but we never really talk about it on those global shippers, forwarders, and shipping companies, right? I mean, we talked about it this morning, headlines, you see the ocean carriers making record profits. Well, historically, they haven't, right? I mean, you look at shipping rates, they've been, I mean, a third of what they are now. At least in the spot market. So, I mean, it really is crazy when you kind of see how everything's been disrupted. Grace, I know we're coming up on time. I know you've got your SiriusXM show every day. Tell us a little bit what's coming up with that.
Yeah, it's been such a blast to bring people on and really introduce that audience to a whole different group of guests. Prior, this 5 to 7 hour was almost more of a trucker's lifestyle type of brand. And it's been really fun for me to introduce that audience to some of the leaders that are a part of this industry. One of my favorite episodes recently is we had the CEO of Tive on, and he got to spend even 20 minutes talking to a driver about ways that he could better prepare himself with cargo insurance, right? And so it's like, even though that's not what Tive directly does, it was really cool to see that interaction. And the guy was, so happy that he had a chance to even ask him a question. And it's hard to be able to reach out to these CEOs directly and get a question asked to them. So it's been really fun to get some call-ins from drivers and hear what they're interested in and ask these individuals, questions they wouldn't be able to ask them normally. And just personally, I'm having a great time building conversations, building relationships with a lot of our guests and introducing them to our different communities at Freightways and showing them that, Freightways is much deeper in content than maybe even what they see when they go to the main site. Introduce them to our podcast, introduce them to people like yourself, and soon we're gonna have you on too with the cold chain community. Yes, yeah. So note that we'll be scheduling that here shortly.
I can't wait. I'm really excited for it, Grace. Well, thank you so much for joining us this morning, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Can't wait to listen to the radio show later.
Thanks so much. See you guys.